Greetings, it's Adam with Irata Non Grata, and coming back to this one as I did make a mistake with the last video. When I originally thought of doing this video, I just wanted to do a comparison between Star Fox and Cybermorph, but in the last video I was talking about influences, and I really didn't have any sourcing to back that up. Nothing that the developers said. Now, of course, back in the day when Cybermorph came out in game magazines, they were talking about Star Fox influences, but Star Fox itself really did, it launched before Cybermorph did in 1993, but it was like spring or February 1993 when it came out in Japan, and Cybermorph came out later that year, and so both games would have been in development at the same time, Cybermorph later on, but when they came up with the concept for Cybermorph, Star Fox wasn't out yet. Maybe they heard rumblings, but yeah, so my apologies on that. So let's do more of a Star Fox versus Cybermorph comparison and see how they stack up against each other. Now, of course, Star Fox famously used the SuperFX chip on the SNES to provide flat-shaded polygon graphics, and they did some other cool effects with it, such as the shadows on the ground and mixing it in with sprites. Cybermorph, on the other hand, no special hardware needed. It's all running off of the much more powerful Atari Jaguar hardware, and of course I know there's tons of talk about what the Jaguar can really do. Was it really 64-bit? Well, either way, regardless of that stuff, as you can see, it does ground shading, shaded polygons. It can do flat shaded polygons. One thing that's very different between the two games is that Star Fox is on rails, whereas Cybermorph is off rails. And Cybermorph really becomes one of the first kind of open world 3D games that people could play on consoles. And I would have to research this. I don't know if there's any way to really know, but it does seem like Star Fox 2 was influenced by Cybermorph's open world or being a off rails, so to speak, type gameplay comparatively to saying Star Fox and Cybermorph can be compared to each other. So maybe Star Fox 2 would have been a better example to say that was influenced by Cybermorph. But again, I don't have any developer statements. Of course, Nintendo doesn't always state things like influences and whatnot. But Cybermorph, I think it was an excellent pack-in choice, and I would have to believe that Atari was influenced to pick this for their pack-in game, as Star Fox had already been out by the time the Jaguar launched, and I think this was a great idea for a pack-in game because it shows, like, if you compare Star Fox and Cybermorph side by side, you can see where Cybermorph has better graphics and among the other things. Now, of course, gameplay-wise, I'd probably play Star Fox over Cybermorph, but I've grown more accustomed to Cybermorph's idea of being able to explore these weird worlds compared to just blasting action. And whereas one thing that always kind of irritated me on Star Fox is sometimes you weren't 100% sure where you were aiming, almost like Zaxxon, in that you're, at least in the level like you see there, you don't have your target reticle. Of course, when it's in first-person mode, it's a bit different, but sometimes just judging where you're supposed to hit on things or avoiding things is a little more tough than in Cybermorph's case. And Cybermorph also was able to show off the different angles. Some of them were useless, but you could still play around with the angles and see where it was. Now, one thing to also point out is that Star Fox was not the first 3D game out there, but it was one of the first ones that people really knew about and got to play. I remember when it came out, people were talking about it all over the place. And we didn't know about iRobot that Atari released back in 1983 to arcades, which was the real first 3D game. And then, of course, there was Hard Driving by Atari Games. But looking back on this, hindsight's 2020, but there's always talk about what the Jaguar could have done to be more successful. I think if they had launched with more games like Cybermorph, like if they had taken games from the Atari ST that were in 3D and enhanced those using the Jaguar hardware and had a bunch of those for the initial launch months, that might have helped give it the momentum that it needed to withstand with the coming Saturn and PlayStation battles. But one thing to also note is that Battlemorph, the sequel to Cybermorph, is really awesome. It's one of my favorite games on the Jaguar platform. It fixes all sorts of things that were wrong with Cybermorph. And Cybermorph in some ways felt like it was a little bit rushed. It had no in-game music, whereas Battlemorph has an awesome soundtrack. Battlemorph also has, just enhanced graphics, more texture mapping, not completely, but a little bit more, better frame rate. It has objective-based missions instead of just collecting pods all the time. Like in this one, you're supposed to blow up the bridges and then collect pods. So, it still has some pod collecting, but Cybermorph was all pod collecting. And then a boss battle after you finish those levels. But Battlemorph had those sorts of things. And so, Star Fox is still a great game. Cybermorph's a great game. Battlemorph's a great game. They're all great games. And they all have their pros and cons, and you can enjoy all of them. But let me know which one of these is your favorite. And if you want to see more comparisons between the two, again, Star Fox was definitely impressive, a very well-polished game, obviously more polished than Cybermorph was. Battlemorph kind of helped make up for the lack of polish that Cybermorph had, but still think that it seems to me that Cybermorph kind of influenced Star Fox at the end of the day. What do you think? Thanks for watching. Catch you on the next one.